Developing now, reaction to stunning new claims that the TWA Flight 800 disaster was no accident. 17 years ago, next month, that Boeing 747 plane went down over Long Island after taking off from New York's JFK Airport en route to Paris. All 230 people on board died. In the wake of the tragedy, investigators painstakingly reconstructed the plane from the wreckage recovered in the Atlantic Ocean, all while a range of theories swirled about what really brought the flight down. The official reason ultimately given for the crash? A gas tank explosion. But now a new documentary features several former investigators involved in this case, men who worked on this case, who say that is flat out wrong, and they are alleging that there was a cover-up.
There was a structural piece of the aircraft lying on the floor that had 3 holes blown through it like a 22 through a tin can with an obvious entrance and exit side of the penetration. I was about to take a picture of it, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Don't take that picture." And I said, "Well, who are you to tell me not to take the picture?" And he said, "FBI."
Because Jim wasn't allowed to take a picture of that part, he looked around the hangar and found other parts with similar holes. And, you know, I'm looking at this and I just don't know how these could occur normally in a fire.
What would your analysis have been?
The primary conclusion was the explosive forces came from outside the airplane, not the center fuel tank.
Joining me now, Tom Stalcup. He's co-producer of the TWA Flight 800 documentary. And joining us by phone is Jim Kallstrom. He's the former lead FBI investigator in this crash. Gentlemen, thank you both very much for being here. Jim, if I could start with you by phone, because you are featured heavily in the documentary, although did not participate in it. And, you know, you're at the center of a lot of these allegations because a lot of these NTSB guys believe it was the FBI who covered this up. They are suggesting, although not coming right out, and saying that this was more likely the result of a missile that took down this flight, and they suggest that the FBI and others worked to cover that up. Your thoughts?
Well, it's a crazy idea. There's nothing could be further from the truth. We turned over heaven and earth, particularly for the missile theory. The FBI thought there was a good chance a missile would be shot at the airplane. We knew there were man-fed missiles left all over the world, stolen from National Guard armories, et cetera, et cetera. So of the 1,000 agents I had working on this matter at the peak, we had at least 100 that were looking at the missile theory. And we brought in experts from China Lake and from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Those are the experts that are the missile experts for the United States military. We had some experts at MIT. I brought in special metallurgists, the former head metallurgists for Alcoa aluminum, and of course our metallurgy and NTSB's metallurgy team. We looked at every piece of that airplane multiple times by all those different category of experts. We knew all about different missiles and how they explode, the type of warheads that could be used. And we followed that to the end, believe me.
Mm-hmm. And
I had a vested interest in this investigation, not because I was the head of the FBI.
This is a picture
but
of you.
because one of my dearest friends' wife died on that airplane.
Understood, Jim. And this is a picture of you holding up a piece of aluminum, showing that you did conduct some tests trying to see what it would look like if a missile had hit the aircraft. I want to bring in Tom and ask you, Tom, you're a physicist who just took a citizen's interest in this case and then really began following it. And you hooked up with these NTSB guys, 6 of them, who were on the investigation. They're not random NTSB guys. They were on this crash, investigating it, and they believe, as you do, that this was not a gas tank explosion. Your response to what we just heard from the former FBI director who was on the case?
Sure. They did look for evidence of a missile, that's true. But the main thing they were looking at were pitting and things that happen when the missile explodes very close to the metal. What there was evidence of, which they neglected to focus on, was evidence of a missile exploding some distance from the aircraft that would not leave those signatures that a bomb or a missile would if it exploded near the aircraft. Now, there were holes directed into the fuselage from the outside in. That's documented. Some had high velocity characteristics. That's documented. Richard Bott from China Lake did come out, just like Mr. Kallstrom said, And he said, well, you know, there is evidence consistent with a missile diving down above the aircraft and coming down near the left wing. But I just can't imagine that happening. That's what he says in his report. But in fact, that's what the witnesses said. There's an object that came from Flight 800's left side, from above, went down, and exactly consistent with Richard Bott of China Lake that did come out and look at this wreckage.
Jim, I want to ask you, because this is a clip from the documentary in which they play some of your statements about what witnesses said on the subject of, was there a missile? And then they play a bit of a CIA animation that suggested, you know, the plane broke, the nose came off, and then the body of the plane continued to ascend. And the film calls that cartoonish and not possible. I want to show this clip and get you to react to it.
There were about 200 people that saw events in the sky that they described, none of which described a missile.
Just after the aircraft exploded, it pitched up abruptly and climbed several thousand feet from 13,800 feet to about 17,000 feet. Those who said they saw something ascend and culminate in an explosion probably saw the burning aircraft ascend and erupt into a fireball, not a missile.
Not a missile. Never was, never will be.
So the CIA video, what do you think of that?
It's a nice cartoon.
Did you happen to watch the CIA animation about what happened?
Yes, I did.
And what did you think about that animation?
That animation didn't resemble anything that I saw in any way whatsoever.
And again, for our viewers, because Jim is with us by phone, that is, you are the FBI investigator featured in that clip. This is the first you've had the chance to react to it. Your thoughts?
Well, Megan, you know, that's 17 years ago, and I'm on a cell phone here, so I don't see it. Of course, I remember the animation, and whether it's amateurish or not is irrelevant. There was no evidence of a missile hitting the plane. We fired all types of missile warheads at carcasses that were out west in the graveyards where airplanes go. So we could have a database of what this type of damage looked like, missiles outside and missiles inside. And at my last meeting on this, all the experts came in from the military, all of our metallurgists came in, all the other people came in, and I said to them, look, is there something we're missing here? Is there something that can't be seen, or, you know, we should take further investigation? And the answer was no by everybody. So it was a preponderance of experts, and believe me, we left no rock unturned on this thing. And whether or not someone liked the animation or whether some eyewitness didn't see what he thought he should see, eyewitness testimony is usually terrible to begin with. I don't use that as an excuse. That's just a fact. So in the bottom line is, you know, where did this new evidence come from? The plane is still in the hangar, and somebody should go and show the NTSB what you're talking about.
Tom,
it's all been looked at numerous times.
Let me get you to weigh in on that, Tom.
Yeah, sure. Well, with all due respect, Mr. Kallstrom, you did order that CIA animation to replace the actual witness testimony. You wrote a letter to the NTSB 3 days before their first public hearing on the crash, 3 weeks after that animation was released, specifically requesting the NTSB chairman not allow any eyewitness to come and testify. To date, not a single eyewitness out of 670 that your investigators located have ever testified publicly on this. Why did you hire the CIA to create this obviously falsified animation which showed an aircraft climbing, which is physically impossible? It's actually impossible based on the radar evidence. If you're going to climb that sharply, that plane's going to have to slow down, just like when you ride a bicycle up a hill. The radar data shows no reduction in airspeed. How are you going to get that climb? It's not going to happen. So the plane didn't climb. It turned left and went down, as our animation shows. The eyewitnesses, if you want to really tell the world what the eyewitnesses saw, let them testify. That's what you should have done back in 1997, and I think you should request that that's done right now.
Jim, I'll let you weigh in on that, and I'd also like you to quickly weigh in on why would there be a conspiracy to cover this up?
You know, I don't know, Megan. If these NTSB investigators were on site and they had problems with You know, these are separate agencies. We do criminal investigations. NTSB does, you know, mechanical, pilot error, non-criminal things. If they had problems with their chief engineers, and, you know, they certainly could have come to me, or they could have been real men and been whistleblowers back then when, if they wanted to prove their conclusions, we could have actually done something about it, not 17 years later. Yeah. Now that they've got their government pensions and they feel safe. You know, I think it's a crazy idea. And it's particularly offensive to me that this is coming forward now, not from the standpoint of whether it's incorrect or correct. I know it's incorrect, but in particular, the families that went through hell on this thing, the families that we were totally bonded with, including the young lady that I was in her wedding, and her husband was an agent that worked with me in the FBI office. So the notion that I would cover up something, and I don't recall telling NTSB not to interview anybody. They could interview whoever the hell they want to interview. It's a separate agency.
Understood. And I want to tell our viewers, and there's so much more to say, Tom, and the documentary is fascinating, although, you know, Jim would say incorrect, but it is fascinating.
It's fascinating, just like Walt Disney's fascinating.
So he's still with us. But folks can check it out. They can hear Tom's full theory, and it's not just Tom, it's the NTSB investigators he interviews as well. It's going to be on July 17th, the anniversary of the crash, 8 p.m. on the cable network EPIX.